I can't say that word. Compartmentalize. Okay, forget it. I'm just not gonna try. Oh, I can't say the word. Okay. Hey, this is Lorena, and I wanted to do a tutorial for you on how to put on borders for beginners, but you know, for people like me who didn't know no better. Yeah, because I just thought you had your quilt top and made your border and just... And apparently it's not done that way. It's a little bit more complicated. Yeah, it's a little bit more techy. Can you believe it? Quilting techy? I'll see you in the border beginner putting on her in a minute. Okay, bye. One of the things I wanted to share on this quilt is I went ahead and I added 3 strips of white, and I also added 3 more strips of black before I placed the border on this. I wanted to make it a little longer. It was kind of short. All right, let's talk about cutting the material for your borders. A long time ago, I used to buy some fabric and cut my border material on the fold of the 45. This is what I'm talking about, the fold of the 45. What I found is if you cut your material that way, this material has a lot of stretch. So I decided to start cutting my material on where the selvage is, on this side. So now I buy about 1 yard or 2, maybe 1.5 yards worth of fabric. So I have longer strips of fabric. And the reason I cut it this way is because this material doesn't have that much stretch, which when you're starting to measure your quilt top and you want to square off your quilt top, having a border that doesn't stretch is better for doing that. Now, because I cut my borders this way, now I have to measure my quilt top differently. All right, let's talk about how you measure your quilt top so that you get the right measurements for your border. All right, I have my quilt right here and I'm going to use it as a demonstration. You're going to go ahead and decide if you want to measure from the top to bottom or from left to right, horizontal or vertical. I tend to measure my quilt borders or my quilt top from the longest point. So I measure vertically. So what you're going to do is you're going to measure the left side, the center, and the right side. And once you have those 3 measurements, you're going to go ahead and divide by 3. You're going to get the average of those 3 measurements, and that's what you're going to cut your border. Now, my friend Melanie and I did a video a while back on wavy border prevention, and the way she measured to get her borders is she measured from the center measurement. Now, if you cut your borders on the fold of the 45, that will work. But for me, because I changed the way I cut the border, I did that once, and because there's not that stretch and pull, I ended up having a 2-inch difference on one of the bottom seams, and I ended up having pleats because of how I cut the border. And this is why now I change the way I cut the border, where I get the 3 measurements and find the average. My border ends up being square, my measurements become more accurate, and there's less stretching, and it brings in the quilt better, and that's why I changed it. Okay, now let's talk pinning. We're going to start pinning that border measurement, and you need 2 of them from the top and bottom, or the right and left, depending on what you decided to measure. What I've learned is you go ahead and kiss your 2 fabrics together, your border and your quilt top, and you pin on the right side of it. Make sure your seams and everything's lined up real pretty. Your edges are lined up, and then you pin on the opposite end and then find center. And then you start pinning from one side where you found center, and you pin out. Find the center of that section and then find centers. And the reason you want to do that is if there's any extra fabric, you want to compartmentalize the fullness in smaller sections so that when you start sewing, you're able to work that fullness in. Okay, that's why we're pinning this way. You're also going to do the pinning on one side of your quilt and the opposite end of your quilt, and then we're going to go and sew it. Now that we're at the sewing machine, you're going to see that sometimes you'll see the fabric on the bottom of your border is puddling, and that's what I'm talking about when I say fullness. What you're going to do is you're going to put it on your sewing machine, and if you see that puddling, just stretch a little bit. And what helps when you stretch a little bit is as you're sewing, the feed dogs take in some of that fullness, and because of the way you cut your border, you still have a little bit of stretch but not a lot of stretch, and that's why pinning and compartmentalizing that fullness in smaller sections helps a lot. And as you're going along, you just make sure if you have puddling, you stretch. If you don't have puddling, just let the fabric be fed through the feed dogs and just keep on sewing until you get to the very end. But in some areas of the quilt, you'll see fullness. In some areas, you're not going to see it. And that's how I did the right side and the left side of the quilt, okay? All right, once you put the border on one section of your quilt, which is, I did the right and the left, you're also going to start measuring the top, center, and the bottom. Again, you're going to do the exact same thing, but on the opposite side. Now we're working on the horizontal. And then you're going to do your average, cut your border, the average measurement that you got, and then go ahead and start pinning the same way and placing your border the same way. Now let me also just share this. For every single border, sometimes you like having like 3 borders, you're going to have to do the same process to make sure that your quilt top is square, that your measurements vertically both are the same, and your measurements horizontally are both the same, and to make sure that your quilt is a nice, strong, stable, beautiful square quilt. Yes, a perfect rectangle. So I really do thank you for watching. I hope you like this tutorial and learning my new way of how I do my borders on my quilt tops. This is beginner friendly. It's not that hard to do. It's just kind of following along and doing those steps. So I really do thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. All right. See you later. And there's some bloopers in a minute. Bye. And your compartment, why can't I say that? You're compartmentalizing, you compartmentalize the fullness in different sections. Now I can say the word compartment. Why can't I say compartmentalize? Oh, forget it. Compartmentalize.